You are here. And I want you to know, before anything else is said, before we go anywhere together in this quiet hour, that arriving here matters. Not just physically, not just the lying down, the closing of the door, the phone set aside. I mean the part of you that decided, even tonight, even after everything today cost you, to stop, to be still, to let yourself be somewhere safe, even if only that was nothing. For someone who has been carrying what you have been carrying, stopping is its own kind of strength. A quiet kind, the kind no one sees. So let yourself be here, fully here. Let the weight of the day stay where the day ended. It will still be there in the morning. You don't have to hold it through the night to prove you haven't forgotten it. The room is quiet. The world outside has slowed. And for the next little while, there is nowhere you are supposed to be, nothing you are supposed to produce, no version of yourself you are required to hold together. You are allowed to simply exist in this moment, tired, perhaps emptied, perhaps carrying something so heavy and so old that you have almost forgotten what it felt like before you were carrying it. You are allowed to bring all of that here. This is not a place that requires you to be further along than you are. This is not a place for the version of you that has it together. This is a place for the actual you, the one who has been fighting longer than anyone around you knows, in ways that are harder to explain than they should be, against things that don't always have names, but that have weight nonetheless. Stay with me. There is something here for you tonight. There is a particular kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. You know the one. It isn't in your muscles. It isn't the kind that a good night's rest or a slow morning would touch. It lives deeper than that. It has settled into the places that the ordinary restorations don't reach. The place where your hope used to be more sure, where your faith used to feel less like effort, where you used to be able to imagine the future without that low hum of dread underneath it. That is what a long fight does to a person. Not all at once. Gradually, the way a river wears stone, not through force, but through persistence, through the sheer unrelenting presence of one hard thing after another, day after day, season after season, until something that used to be solid in you has been smoothed into something thinner. And the cruel thing about that kind of tired is that it is almost invisible, even to the people closest to you. You still show up. You still function. You still manage to say the right things at the right moments and hold the pieces of your responsibilities together with enough competence that no one stops to ask whether the person doing all that holding is herself being held. No one stopped to ask. Or maybe they did once, early on, and you said you were fine because you were not yet sure how to explain something you hadn't yet fully named yourself. And then time passed, and the asking became less frequent, the way asking does when the answer is always the same. And you got so accustomed to being fine, to performing fine, to maintaining the shape of fine, that somewhere along the way you stopped being sure where the performance ended and the reality began. That is not a failure. That is what surviving looks like when you have been doing it alone for a long time. The weight you are carrying tonight is real. I am not going to move past it quickly. I am not going to hand you 3 verses and a promise and expect that the thing you have been living inside for months, for years for some of you, will simply lift because the language around it is beautiful enough. It won't. And you deserve better than that. So let it be real here. Let the weight be exactly as heavy as it is. You don't have to minimize it for this room. Let's stay here a little longer. Because this part matters. There is something specific that happens to a person who fights alone. Not just the exhaustion of the fight itself, but the particular damage of fighting it, without witnesses, without someone who knows the full weight of what you are up against, without anyone to hand the worry to, even briefly, even just long enough to rest your arms. Because fighting alone means you also carry the silence around the fight, the the careful management of what you let show and what you keep contained. The energy spent not on the battle itself, but on making sure the battle doesn't alarm anyone. On answering the question, "How are you doing?" with enough warmth and enough lightness that the person asking feels reassured and moves on. You have become very good at that, and it has cost you something. Not just energy, something harder to name than energy. A kind of inner privacy that became, over time, a kind of inner isolation. Because when you never let anyone fully see what you are carrying, something happens slowly. You begin to forget that being seen is even possible. You begin to relate to your own struggle as something to be managed rather than something to be shared. You begin to move through your own life at a slight remove from yourself, observing the person doing the fighting rather than fully inhabiting her. And faith becomes complicated in that place. Because the same instinct that keeps you composed in front of other people, the instinct that says hold it together, don't fall apart, keep moving, that same instinct can follow you into prayer, into the quiet moments when you are alone with God and could, theoretically, let everything down. And instead, you find yourself presenting the composed version, the faith-filled version. The one who knows the right words and asks with appropriate confidence and closes with amen before the really honest thing has even reached the surface. Because the really honest thing is this. You are not sure how much longer you can do this. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that frightens you, or perhaps it does, a little, in the dark. But in the quiet and very real way of someone who has been drawing from a reservoir that no one has been refilling. Who has been giving out and holding up and pressing through, and who reached for something inside herself recently and found less than she expected. That is where you are tonight. And that is exactly where this begins. There was a moment. You may not have marked it when it happened. These things rarely announce themselves. There was no single morning when you woke up and said, "Today is the day I have nothing left." It was quieter than that, slower than that. It was the moment you reached for the strength that had always been there before, the strength that had carried you through every previous version of hard, and you found that this time it did not come the way it used to. Maybe you were in the middle of something ordinary. A phone call, a bill, a conversation that required more of you than you had, and something inside you that had always held simply did not hold. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone around you would have caught. But you felt it, the way you feel a step give way beneath you before you even have time to fall. And the strange thing was the silence of it. No one noticed. The day continued. The demands kept arriving, the inbox and the obligations and the faces that needed something from you kept coming, the way they always do, indifferent to the internal thing that had just quietly shifted. And so you kept moving. Stopping was not a real option, and falling apart in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday was not something you knew how to do. So you did what you have always done. You found something, some last reserve, some thin remainder of will, and you spent it. And then you found a little more, and spent that too. You knew something had changed in the architecture of how you were holding yourself together, that the walls were thinner now than they had been. The version of strong you were presenting to the world had become more expensive to maintain. And in the quiet moments, in the car alone, or in the few minutes before sleep came, you let yourself feel the edges of it, the realness of how depleted you actually were beneath all the functioning. Let your shoulders drop. Let that be true in this room. Because here is what I want to say about that moment, about the day the strength ran out. It was not a verdict on you. There was no evidence that you were not enough, not faithful enough, not resilient enough. It was evidence that you are human. Human beings were not built to carry indefinitely without being carried. That the capacity for endurance, real endurance, was never designed to be self-sustaining. It was designed to be held from the outside, even while it holds on the inside. You were holding. no one was holding you. And a person can do that for a season. God knows you did, but there is a limit built into the design, not as a punishment, not as a flaw, but as an invitation. The limit is the place where the striving finally becomes still enough to be reached, where the hands that have been gripping so tightly for so long begin, slowly, to open. You are at that place tonight. There is a moment in the Gospels that does not get enough quiet attention. Jesus is speaking to a crowd. Not a crowd of people who have it together. Not a gathering of the composed and the capable and the ones who have successfully managed their burdens into something presentable. He is speaking to people who are tired in the specific way that you are tired tonight, worn down not by a single thing, but by the accumulated weight of a life that has asked more than it has given back. And into that crowd, into that specific and ordinary and unspectacular exhaustion, he says something that should probably stop us longer than it does. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Don't come to me when you have tried everything else. Not come to me when the situation has become dramatic enough to justify the approach. Don't come to me once you have rested up a little and have something to bring. Come as you are. As you actually are tonight, not the version you would prefer to present, not the one with the composure and the appropriate faith language and the tidy summary of what you need. The actual you, the one who is not sure how to explain what is wrong, because what is wrong does not easily reduce to words. He already knows what is wrong. That is the thing about being seen by someone who was present for every moment of the fight you fought alone. He was not absent while you were managing the appearances. He was not fooled by the fine. He did not accept the composed version as the complete version and move on, the way that people sometimes do when the answer sounds close enough to okay. He saw the other thing, the thing underneath. The 2am version and the car alone version, and the quiet moment in the middle of an ordinary day when the sadness moved through you so quickly you almost missed it yourself. He saw all of it, every unwitnessed moment of it, and he did not see it from a distance. That matters. The invitation is not from someone observing your weariness from somewhere comfortable and extending a hand across the gap. It is from someone who entered the full weight of human exhaustion himself, who knew what it was to be pressed beyond what felt bearable, who sweat in a garden and wept at a tomb and cried out from a cross about being forsaken. He is not handing you comfort from outside the experience of suffering. He is offering it from inside it, from having been there himself, in the specific and embodied and unglamorous reality of what it costs to be human and to hurt. He is not surprised by where you are tonight. He is not disappointed that it took this long, that the strength ran out, that the reservoir emptied before you found your way here. There is no record being kept of how many times you should have come sooner. There is only this, the open invitation. The table still set, the door still open at midnight, for the one who finally, quietly, stopped pretending she was fine long enough to walk through it. You do not have to arrive with anything. The weariness itself is enough. The empty hands are enough. The not knowing how to pray right now is enough. He has received people in worse condition than this and called it the beginning of something rather than the end. This is the beginning of something. When we talk about restoration, we tend to reach for large and general language, blessing, renewal, breakthrough, words that are true in the way that broad things are true, but that sometimes pass over the surface of a specific need without quite reaching it. Because what you lost in this fight was not general, it was particular. It had a shape, and what God restores, when He restores, is not a generic version of wholeness. It is the specific thing the specific battle took from you. So let's name some of it. Not to reopen wounds, but because the things that went quiet in you during this season deserve to be seen before they are restored. They deserve to be called by their real names. Some of you lost the ability to trust easily, not faith in God exactly, but the softer kind of trust. The kind that lets you believe that things will work out, that people will come through, that the ground beneath tomorrow is solid enough to step onto without bracing first. That trust was not taken from you in a single moment. It was worn away slowly by the accumulated experience of hoping and being disappointed, believing, and then having to quietly revise what you were willing to believe again. He restores that, not by removing the memory of what taught you to guard yourself, but by slowly making it safe again to open what you closed. Some of you lost the ability to ask for help. Somewhere in the long middle of the fight, asking began to feel like exposure, like an admission that you were not handling it, like a burden you were placing on people who had their own weight to carry. And so you stopped asking. You became self-contained in a way that looked like strength from the outside and felt like loneliness from the inside. The need didn't go away. You just learned to carry it without letting it show. He restores that too. The willingness to be helped. The capacity to receive without immediately calculating what it costs the other person. And some of you lost something quieter than either of those things. You lost the simple and unguarded sense that you are worth tending to, that your weariness matters, that the state of your interior life is worth someone's attention and care. The fight taught you, slowly and without announcing it, to place yourself last, to address every other need before your own, to treat your own exhaustion as a problem to be managed rather than a wound to be tended. That is what he sees tonight. Not just the tiredness, the belief underneath the tiredness that says you do not quite deserve to be restored. That restoration is for people whose suffering has been more visible, more dramatic, more worthy of the attention. Let that belief be wrong. It is wrong. And the restoring begins not when you have convinced yourself of your own worthiness, but when you simply stop moving long enough to be reached. You are still enough right now. You have been still long enough. The hands that restore are already close, already at work, already attending to the specific and unnamed and very real things the fight quietly took from you. He knows what they are, even the ones you have not yet found words for. There is something the 23rd Psalm says that is easy to read past. He leads me beside still waters, not rushing waters, not the kind that move with urgency and noise and the constant forward pressure of something that cannot slow down. Still waters, the kind that has no agenda, the kind that do not ask anything of you when you arrive at their edge, that simply exist in their quietness, patient and unhurried, as though they have been waiting there for exactly as long as it took you to find your way to them. But here is the part that matters for you tonight specifically. The shepherd does not lead all the sheep to the same water in the same way. He leads them to the water that their particular condition can receive from, and the sheep that needs still water most is not the one who is simply thirsty. It is the one who has been moving for so long, at such a sustained and necessary pace, that the sound of rushing water would feel like one more thing demanding something. One more urgency in a life that has been nothing but urgency for longer than it should have been. That is who this water is for tonight. It is for you, because you have not been still in a long time. Not really. Even in the moments that looked like rest from the outside, something in you was still running, still monitoring, still keeping one part of itself alert to whatever might need managing next. The body would be horizontal, but the mind would be making its rounds, checking the perimeter, reviewing what was left undone and what was coming tomorrow, and whether the thing you said to that person landed the way you meant it to. You have been on watch for a very long time, and there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from that. From the sustained low-level vigilance of someone who learned, somewhere along the way, that relaxing fully was not safe. That the moment you stopped paying attention was often the moment something slipped. And so you stayed attentive. You stayed ready. You managed the worry by staying close to it, as though keeping it in sight was the same thing as keeping it under control. It was not rest. It was a quieter form of the same fight. What is being offered to you right now, in this room, in this hour, is something different from that. Not the performance of rest while the vigilance continues underneath. Actual stillness. The kind that goes all the way down. The kind that is only possible when you are willing, even briefly, to release the watch to someone else. To let the perimeter be someone else's responsibility for the length of a night. Let your body be heavy now. Not as an instruction to follow correctly, but as a permission to receive. The still water does not require you to drink deeply tonight. It does not require a profound spiritual moment, or the right quality of faith, or even the feeling that any of this is reaching you the way it should. It only requires your presence. The simple, exhausted, unpolished presence of someone who stopped moving long enough to sit at the edge of something quiet. That is enough. It has always been enough. The water is still. And so, for this moment, are you. Loneliness has a way of rewriting the past, not intentionally, not in a way you chose or would have chosen. But when you have been carrying something in isolation for long enough, the isolation begins to feel like the whole story, like the defining feature of the season. And without meaning to, you begin to remember the hard months as months in which you were entirely alone, in which the silence of heaven was as complete as the silence of the people around you. That memory is real. The feeling behind it is real. But the story it is telling you is not the whole truth. Take a slow breath. Let this be received gently. The phone call that came on the specific day you needed it most. You did not ask for it. You were not expecting it. And the person on the other end did not know what was happening inside you. But something moved them to reach out on that day, at that hour, and for a few minutes the weight was slightly less than it had been. That was not a coincidence. The moment in the middle of the worst week when something shifted just enough. Not everything, not even most things. But one thing settled, one thing held, one thing did not collapse the way you had been bracing for it to collapse. And you kept moving because of it. Because of that one thing that held when it had no particular reason to hold. That was not luck. Not distant, not watching from somewhere removed, but present in the specific and ordinary and easily missed ways that presence sometimes moves when the more obvious forms would overwhelm. He was in the held thing and the phone call and the morning that was somehow more bearable than the night before it had any right to produce. You were not as alone as it felt. And I want to say that carefully, because I am not trying to minimize what the loneliness costs you. It costs you something real. The absence of human witness, of someone who knew the full weight and stayed anyway. That absence is its own grief, and it deserves to be named as such. What I am saying is not that the loneliness was an illusion. I am saying it was not the complete picture. There was a witness. There has always been a witness. Every moment you held something together in private, every night you lay exactly where you are lying now and talked yourself into facing another day. Every quiet act of courage that happened in a room where no one else was present. There was a witness to all of it. Someone for whom none of it was invisible. Someone who kept the record of every unacknowledged thing you carried and called it faithfulness, even when you were only calling it survival. He saw it. He sees you now. And the seeing was never interrupted, not by the seasons when your faith ran thin, not by the nights when prayer felt like speaking into an empty room, not by the distance you may have felt growing between you and him during the hardest stretch of the fight. The distance you felt was real, but it was not the whole truth. He did not move. He was there in the silence, the same way he was there in the moments you recognized him, patient, present, keeping watch over the one who had been keeping watch over everything else. You were never as alone as it felt. And you are not alone tonight. There is a passage in Isaiah that gets quoted often, usually with a kind of energy that the passage itself does not quite have. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. We tend to reach for that line first. The soaring. The height, the image of something powerful and unencumbered, moving above the weight that once pressed it down. And that image is true. It is in there, but it is not where the passage begins. And if you go to the beginning, you find something that fits tonight far better than the eagles do. He gives strength to the weary, and to the one who has no might, he increases power. Not to the one who has recovered enough to be impressive again, not to the one who has processed the hard season thoroughly and arrived on the other side with the testimony ready. To the weary, to the one who has no might, to the person in the specific and unglamorous condition of having nothing left, which is exactly the condition you have been honest about tonight. That is where the strength enters, not after the emptiness, into it. But here is what I want you to understand about how it returns, because this matters for how the coming days will feel. The strength that God restores to someone who has fought a long and lonely battle does not always return the way it left. It does not always arrive as a sudden surge, a felt infilling, a morning where you wake up and everything that was depleted has been replenished overnight, and you are recognizably yourself again in all the ways you remember. Sometimes it returns more quietly than that, more slowly. It returns as the ability to get through a Tuesday without the weight being quite as total as it was the Tuesday before. It returns as a moment of genuine laughter that surprises you, because you had forgotten that laughter could still be genuine. It returns as a small and ordinary hope, not the grand kind, just the quiet sense that tomorrow might be slightly more bearable than today, and that slight bearability is enough to keep the foot moving forward. Let your hands open where they are resting. It returns as trust coming back in small increments, as the willingness to ask for help from one person, just one, about one thing, as the slow and tentative reopening of the parts of yourself that the fight had taught you to keep closed. Not all at once, not in a way that feels like restoration from the outside, but real nonetheless, underneath the surface, the way roots move in winter, invisible and slow and entirely alive. And the eagles, the mounting up, that is also true, and it is also coming. But for tonight, for this particular midnight, the word that belongs to you is not eagles. It is the word just before them, the one that does not get quoted as often, because it is less dramatic and more honest. That is enough for tonight, not soaring, walking, one foot and then the other, on ground that is more solid than it has felt in a long time, held by a strength that is not yours and was never required to be. The kind that enters the empty place not to impress you, but to sustain you. Quietly, faithfully, for exactly as long as the road requires. You will not faint. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. The strength that is returning to you is steadier than the strength you lost, because this time it is not resting on what you can produce. It is resting on what he has already promised. And he has never once failed to keep what he promised, even when the keeping came slower than you hoped and in a form you did not recognize until you were already being held by it. Father, we come to you at the end of a long day, and at the end of a longer season for some of us. We come without performance, without the composed version, without the faith language arranged neatly around the thing we actually feel. We come as we are, which is tired, and in some cases emptied in ways we have not yet found words for, and in all cases in need of something that only you can give. We come on behalf of the one who has been fighting alone. You know who that is tonight. You know the specific shape of the battle, the particular weight of it, the exact number of days it has been going on without adequate witness or relief. You know what it has cost. Not in the general way that knowledge sometimes works, but in the specific and intimate way of someone present for every moment of it, every private moment, every unwitnessed act of endurance, every night that looked like this one, where the only honest thing left was to lie down and admit that the strength was gone. We are admitting it now, together, in this room. We are not pretending tonight that the hard thing is smaller than it is. We are not dressing the weight in more manageable language so that the asking feels more appropriate. We are bringing the full and actual thing, the exhaustion that sleep has not been touching, the trust that wore thin over too many disappointments, the hope that got quiet somewhere in the middle of the waiting has not yet found its full voice again, the loneliness of carrying what we carried without anyone who knew the whole of it. We bring all of it, and we lay it down here. Restore what the fight took from us, Father, not the general version of wholeness, but the specific things. The ability to trust again without bracing against the trusting. The willingness to ask for help without it feeling like failure. The simple and unguarded belief that we are worth tending to, that our weariness matters, that the state of the interior life is not less important than all the external things we have been managing. Restore the hope that has gone quiet, not all at once. We are not asking for a sudden and dramatic reversal of everything hard. We are asking for enough. Enough for tomorrow. Enough to take the next step on ground that feels more solid than it did before tonight. Enough to believe that the road ahead is being led by someone who has already walked it and knows what the terrain requires. Be near the ones who still feel the distance tonight. The ones for whom this hour feels less like communion and more like speaking into a silence that does not answer. Meet them there. Not with the expectation that they will feel your presence before they are ready to feel it, but with the simple reality of it. Present in the room, whether or not the room feels full. Holding what they are holding, whether or not the holding is felt yet. Watch over the one who is lying down now with things still unresolved. The relationship has no clear answer yet. The financial weight that followed them to bed. The health fear that sits at the back of every ordinary thought. The grief that has not finished its work. The future is still unclear in more ways than one. None of it is outside of your reach. None of it has exceeded what you are able to carry. And so we release it now. Not because it is resolved, but because you are trustworthy. Because you are trustworthy in the valley and at the table and in every moment we did not recognize you until later. You have always been faithful. Even when the faithfulness arrived in forms we did not expect. Let the sleep that comes tonight be real rest. Not just the absence of movement, but the presence of peace, the deep and settled kind that does not depend on the circumstances being different by morning, the kind that comes from knowing whose hands are holding what we could not hold ourselves. We are yours. We have always been yours. And we are trusting you with tonight. In Jesus' name, Amen. You have been here for the whole of it. And I want you to notice something before the sleep comes. You came to this hour carrying what you came with. The weight, the weariness, the long and largely invisible fight. And you did not put it down because the circumstances changed. You did not put it down because the answers arrived, or the situation was resolved, or the thing you have been afraid of finally showed its face and turned out to be smaller than you feared. You put it down because you chose to. Because something in you, tired as it is, still knows the difference between a burden that is yours to carry and one that was never meant to be carried alone. That is not a small thing. In a person as worn as you are tonight, that kind of choosing is its own quiet form of faith. Let the room be still now. Let the weight of the blanket be something you feel, something real and present and grounding. The simple physical fact of being held by something, even something as ordinary as this. The fight is not over. You know that. Morning will come, and some of what was hard yesterday will still be hard tomorrow, and the road ahead has not been cleared of everything that made the road behind so costly. That is true, and you deserve not to be told otherwise. But something has shifted tonight, even if you cannot yet measure the shift. Something was named that needed name. Something was brought into a room that had been carried alone for too long, and the bringing of it, the simple act of letting it be seen, changes something in the architecture of how you will carry it from here. You are not leaving this hour the same way you entered it. The shepherd who led you through every valley you have walked is already on the road ahead of you. not waiting to see how tomorrow goes before he commits to being present in it. Already there. Already between you and whatever the morning is going to ask of you. Already acquainted with the terrain of the day you have not yet lived. Already holding what you will need before you know you need it. You do not have to brace for tomorrow tonight. Let your body be completely heavy now. Let every place that has been holding tension for longer than you can remember, finally, fully, without condition, release. The jaw, the shoulders, the hands, the place behind your eyes where the worry lives when it has nowhere else to go. Let it all be soft. The watch has been taken. The night is held, and the one holding it has never once grown tired, has never once looked away, has never once failed to be exactly what was needed at exactly the moment the need arrived. You are going to be okay, not because the hard thing is over, because you are not facing it alone, and you never were, and you will not be when the light comes back and the day begins again, and you take the first step onto ground that is more solid than it feels. He is with you. He has always been with you. Sleep now. You are safe. You are held. And you are deeply, faithfully, permanently loved by the one who saw everything the fight cost you and called you worthy of restoration before you ever found your way to asking for it. Rest. There is grace enough for morning.